When he prepared the heavens, I was there. When he prepared and preordained the heaven and the reward which was to be given to the just sons of the church after their sojourn upon earth, then already was decreed the union of humanity with the Word, thereby meriting grace as their head, and with him his mother most holy. Having destined the greater part of this grace for the mother and the son, he then deposed and arranged similar gifts of glory for the other saints. When with a certain law and compass he enclosed the depths, namely, when he decided to close the abysses of his divinity in the person of the Son, according to a certain law and measure which no living being can ever compass or understand, he delineated this sphere and circumference where none could nor ever can enter except only the Word, since none but himself can ever fill his place. For thus he was able to empty Philippians 11:7 and humiliate his divinity in the humanity, then both humanity and divinity in the womb of the most holy Mary, afterwards in the small quantity and species of the bread and wine, and finally in the narrow space of sinful mortal hearts. All this is indicated by the words abysses, law, and circle or limits. They are also called certain on account of their vast bearing and also on account of the certainty with which they were to be fulfilled, in spite of the seeming impossibility, and on account of the difficulty of explaining them in words. It certainly did not appear feasible that the divinity should be subject to law, nor that it should enclose itself within determined limits, but the wisdom and the power of that same Lord made it possible, and has accomplished it by enclosing himself in a designated created being. When he established the sky above and poised the fountains of the waters, when he encompassed the sea with its bounds and set a law to the waters, that they should not pass their limits, he calls here the just heavens, for that is what they are, as God remains and dwells within them by grace, and through it, according to each one's disposition, gives them courage and firmness to rise above the earth as long as they are pilgrims. Afterwards he gives them a place and a dwelling in the heavenly Jerusalem according to their merits. For them he poised the fountains and has divided them, distributing to each one with equity. He weighs the gifts of glory, the virtues, the helps, and the perfections according to the dispositions of his wisdom. When he resolved to make the distributions of these waters of grace, he also resolved to give to the humanity united to the divinity all the ocean of graces and gifts which naturally flowed from the divinity in its union with the only begotten of the Father. Although this ocean was infinite, he placed confines to it, namely the humanity, in which was to dwell the plenitude of the divinity. Colossians 2:9. And it was enclosed 33 years within these confines, in order that he might dwell among men, and in order that what happened to the 3 apostles on Tabor Mount might not happen to all men. In the same moment in which this entire ocean and all the rivers of grace reached Christ our Lord as being nearest to the deity, they also redounded in his most holy mother as being nearest to her only begotten Son. For without the mother, and precisely such a mother, the gifts and graces of her Son could not have been disposed of in such order and with such high perfection. Nor did the admirable harmony of the celestial and spiritual machinery and the distribution of the gifts of the Church, militant and triumphant, rest on any other foundation. When he balanced the foundation of the earth, I was with him, forming all things. The works ad extra are common to the 3 divine persons, for they are one God, one wisdom, one power. Therefore, it was unavoidably necessary that the Word, in whom according to the divinity all things are made, should be in union with the Father in making them. But here more is meant, for also the incarnate Word was already present together with his most holy Mother in the divine will. Thus, just as, through the Word, as far as he is God, all things were made, so also for him, in the first place, and because he is the most noble and most worthy end, were created the foundations of the earth and all that is contained in it. Therefore, it is farther said, and I was delighted every day playing before him at all times, playing in the world. The incarnate Word diverted himself at all times because he knew all the ages and the lives of all the mortals, all being as one day in comparison with eternity. Psalms 89:4. He was delighted because the whole course of creation had found its end. For when the ultimate day, with all its perfection, should arrive, men were to enjoy the affluence of grace and the crown of glory. He diverted himself, as it were, counting the days when he should descend from heaven to earth and assume human flesh. He knew that all the works and the thoughts of men were like a play, wherein all is mere burlesque and deceit. He saw also the just, who, though so weak and limited in their capacity, nevertheless would be fit for the manifestation and communication of God's glory and perfections. He compared his immutability with the changefulness of men, and how he was nevertheless to act in concert with them. He delighted in his own works, and especially in those which he ordained in his most holy mother. He took a great delight in the prospect of assuming the form of man within her and in making her worthy of so great a privilege. And because the conception of these ideals and the efficacious decree of the divine will in their regard were to be followed with their actual fulfillment, therefore the divine word adds, quote, "And my delight is to be with the children of men," unquote. "My recreation is to work for them and show them favors. My contentment is to die for them, and my joy is to be their teacher and their redeemer. My delight is to raise the needy one from the dust and unite myself with the lowly one." Psalms 112:7. "My pleasure is to unbend my divinity for this purpose, and to clothe it with human nature, to constrain and debase myself, to suspend the glory of my body in order to make myself capable of suffering and of meriting for men the friendship of the Father, to be a mediator between his most just indignation and the malice of men, and to be their model and head whom they may imitate. O eternal and incomprehensible goodness, how am I ravished with admiration when I compare the immensity of thy immutable being with the insignificance of man, when I see thy eternal love mediating between two extremes of such immeasurable distance, a love infinite for a creature so insignificant and at the same time so ungrateful. Oh, on what a low and debased object, O Lord, dost thou cast thy eyes, and on what a noble object can and should man fix his thought and his affection in beholding such a mystery. Filled with admiration and with sadness of heart, I lament over the unhappy state of men, their darkness and blindness, since they do not make any effort to understand how much thy majesty has been beforehand in looking down upon them and in offering them true felicity with such great love and care as if thy own consisted in it. All his works and the disposition of them, as they were to be called into being, the Lord had in his mind ab initio, and he numbered and weighed them according to his equity and rectitude. He knew the constitution of the world before its creation, and it was written in the book of Wisdom 7:18. He knew the beginning, the middle, and the end of time, the changes of the years and the courses of the ages, the disposition of the stars, the powers of the elements, the nature of animals, the wrath of wild beasts, the force of winds, the difference of plants, the virtues of roots, and the thoughts of men. All he weighed and counted. Not only that which is literally true of the rational and irrational creatures, but he preordained also all that which is signified mystically by these creatures. But as this comes not within my scope at present, I do not speak of it in this place. Concerning a doubt which I proposed regarding the doctrine contained in these chapters and the answer to it. In regard to the significance of the doctrine contained in the last two chapters, a doubt occurred to me, and I have often heard and been informed by learned persons that the same is discussed also in the schools. The doubt was as follows. If the principal motive of the incarnation of the Word was to make him head and the firstborn of all creation, Colossians 1:15, and through the hypostatic union with human nature to communicate his attributes and perfections in a manner befitting his grace and glory to the predestined, and if to assume flesh capable of suffering and dying for man, was his secondary motive, then if these assumptions are true, how comes it that there is such a diversity of opinion in regard to it in the Holy Church? The most common assumption is that the eternal Word descended from heaven expressly for the purpose of redeeming men through his most holy passion and death. This doubt I proposed humbly to the Lord. After giving me an understanding and a great enlightenment, by which I perceived and understood many mysteries, he condescended to answer me. The mysteries themselves I cannot explain, because the words of the Lord comprehend and mean so much. But his answer was as follows: My spouse and dove, hear, for as a father and a teacher I will solve thy doubt and instruct thee in thy ignorance. Know that the principal and legitimate end of the decree which I had in view in resolving to communicate my divinity to the hypostatic union of the Word with human nature was the glory which would redound to my name through this communication, and also that which was to redound to the creatures capable thereof. This decree would without doubt have been executed in the Incarnation, even if the first man had not sinned, for it was an express decree, substantially independent of any condition. Therefore, the intention of my will, which was primarily to communicate myself to the soul and humanity of the Word, was to be efficaciously fulfilled. This was conformable to the justice and rectitude of my works, and although it was subsequent to its execution, it was nevertheless antecedent in my intention. If I waited before sending my only begotten, it was because I had resolved to prepare for him beforehand a holy and select congregation of the just, who, presupposing the fall of mankind, would be like roses among the thorns, that is, the sinners. Foreseeing the fall of the human race, I determined by an express decree that the Word should come in a form capable of suffering and death for the redemption of his people, whose head he was to be. Thus my infinite love for man could be so much the more known and manifest, and a just satisfaction would be rendered to my equity and justice. And if he who was to be the first in existence was a sinner, he that was to be first in dignity would be the Redeemer. 1 Corinthians 15:21. Thus also men might come to know the gravity of sin, the love one and the same Creator, Vivifier, Redeemer, and Judge of all mortals. I also wished, as it were, to compel them to make a proper return of gratitude and love, refusing to punish them without reprieve, as I have punished the apostate angels, but pardoning them and looking upon them with mercy. I offered them an opportune remedy by executing the rigor of my justice upon my only begotten Son, and reserving for man the kindness of my great mercy. And in order that thou mayest better understand the answer of thy doubt, remember that there is neither any succession of time in my decrees, nor any need of it for the perception and execution of them. Those that say that the Word became incarnate in order to redeem the world say well, and those that say that he would have become incarnate also if man had not sinned likewise speak well. Only it must be understood in the right way. For if Adam had not sinned, Christ would have descended from heaven in that form, which would be sustainable to the state of man's innocence. But as Adam sinned, I resolved by the secondary decree that he should be made of passible nature, since, foreseeing sin, it was proper that it should be repaired in the way in which he has done it. And as you desire to know how the mystery of the Incarnation would have taken place if man had preserved the state of innocence, know that the human substance would have been essentially the same as now, only it would be clothed with the gifts of impassibility and immortality, such as my only begotten possessed after his resurrection and before his ascension. He would live and converse with men. The hidden sacraments and mysteries would all be manifest, and many times would his glory shine forth as it happened once in his mortal life. Mark 17:1. He would, in that state of man's innocence, have become manifest to all men in the same manner as he once showed himself to the 3 apostles in his mortal state. All those on the way to heaven would see the great glory of my only begotten. They would be consoled by conversing with him, and they would place no obstacle to his divine workings, for they would be without sin. But all this was impeded and spoiled by the guilt of sin, and on that account it was proper that he should come impassible in mortal nature. Be good, kitty. The existence of different opinions regarding these sacraments and other mysteries in the Church arises from the fact that I manifest and give light concerning one set of mysteries to some teachers, and illumine others concerning other mysteries, for mortals are not capable of receiving all the light. It is not expedient that the knowledge of all things be given to one man, as long as men are viators. I don't know what that word means. Viators. For also in the state of comprehensors they obtain them in parts and according to the state and the merits of each. But the plenitude of all gifts is due only to the humanity of my only begotten, and to his mother in proper proportion. The other mortals receive it neither entirely, nor is it always given so clearly as to assure them together. Therefore they must acquire it by means of study and the use of letters and science. There are also many truths revealed in Holy Scriptures, and to some men light is given from above. Yet as I leave most men to work by their natural light, it must follow that they understand these mysteries in different senses, and that there exist different explanations and different meanings regarding the different passages in Scripture, for each adheres to his opinion according to his understanding. Many have a good intention, and the light and truth is essentially one, but it is made use of with diversity of judgment and inclinations, so that some adhere to these teachers, others to those, and so the controversies arise among them. One of the reasons why the opinion that the Word came from heaven mainly for the sake of redeeming the world is more common can be partly explained by the fact that the mystery of the redemption with its object has already been consummated and has been mentioned so often in Scriptures, thus causing it to be better understood and manifested. The impassibility of Christ, on the contrary, was neither effected, nor was it simply and absolutely decreed. All that pertained to this state remains concealed, and nobody could be sure of it, except those particular ones, whom I select for the reception of that light, and for the revelation of this decree of my love for man. And although this would certainly be capable of moving men, if they would ponder over it and penetrate it, yet the decree and the work of his redemption from sin is more powerful and efficacious to move them towards some acknowledgement and return of my immense love, for this is the end which promotes my works. Therefore I fittingly provide that these motives and mysteries be kept especially before the mind and be more frequently expounded. Advert also that in one work two results can well be intended, when one of them is conditional. Thus it was that the Word would not have descended in passible flesh if man had not sinned, and if he would sin, he would come in a body capable of suffering. Whatever would happen, the decree of the Incarnation would not be left unfulfilled. I desire that the sacraments of the redemption be recognized and held in esteem, and that they always be remembered, in order that they may bring the proper fruit. But just as much I desire that the mortals recognize the Word as their head and as the final object of all creation, and of all the rest of the human race, for conjointly with my own kindness, his formation was the principal motive for giving existence to the creatures. Therefore he should be honored not only because he has redeemed the human race, but also because he furnished the motive for its creation. Wow. Take notice also, my spouse, that very often I permit and cause differences of opinions among the doctors and teachers. Thus some of them maintain what is true, and others, according to their natural disposition, defend what is doubtful. Others still again are permitted to say even what is not true, though not in open contradiction to the veiled truths of the faith, which all must hold. Some also teach what is possible according to their supposition. By this varied light, truth is traced, and the mysteries of faith become more manifest. Doubt serves as a stimulus to the understanding for the investigation of truth. Therefore, controversies of the teachers fulfill a proper and holy end. They are also permitted in order to make known that real science dwells in my church more than in the combined study of all the holy and perfect teachers, and that she can make them wise above the wisdom of the worldly wise, that there is above them one who is the prompter of the wise, wisdom 7:15, namely myself, who alone knows all and comprehends all, who weighs and measures without ever being measured or comprehended. Wisdom 9:13. That men, although they may search my judgments and testimonies ever so much, cannot attain them unless I give the intelligence and light. Job 32:8. Who am the beginning and the author of all wisdom and science. I desire that men, in acknowledging all this, give me praise, exaltation, confession, supremacy, and glory forever. I desire also that the holy doctors acquire for themselves much grace, light, and glory by their earnest, laudable, and sacred study, and that the truth be more and more clearly detected and purified, and be traced to its source. By humbly investigating the mysteries and the admirable works of my right hand, they come to be partakers of them, and of the bread of the understanding. The Holy Scriptures, Ecclesiasticus 15:3. I have especially shown my providence in regarding to doctors and teachers, although their opinions and doubts have been so diverse and for such different ends. Sometimes for my greater glory and honor, sometimes for earthly purposes, they are permitted to dispute and to contradict each other, and there is a great inequality in the manner in which they have proceeded to, and do proceed to show their emulation and earnestness. But with all this I have directed, governed, and enlightened them, giving them my protection in such a manner that the truth may be investigated and clearly manifested. The light is spread out, so that many of my perfections and wonderful works have been made known, and the Holy Scriptures have been interpreted according to high standards, which has been very pleasing to me. For this reason, the fury of hell, with inconceivable envy, especially in these our times, has raised its throne of iniquity, pretending to engulf the waters of the Jordan, Job 40:18, and obscure the light of holy faith by heretical doctrines, and seeking to sow its false seeds by the help of man, Matthew 13:25. But the rest of the church and its truths are in most perfect order. The Catholics, although much involved and blind in other respects, hold nevertheless the truths of faith and its holy light without diminution. Without diminution. I call all men with fatherly love to share this happiness, yet few are the elect who choose to respond to my call. I also desire thee to understand, my spouse, how well my providence disposes such things in such a way, that the teachers, by the diversity of their opinions, and by their own diligent exertion and study, scrutinize more deeply my testimonies, and thus lay bare the marrow of the Holy Scriptures to wayfaring man. But it would be very pleasing to me, and in harmony with my service, if learned persons would extinguish and do away with pride, envy, and ambition after vain honors. Also all the other passions and vices which arise from them, together with the bad seeds that are likely to be generated from that sort of occupation. Matthew 13:25. But I do not root out this bad seed at present, in order that the good may not be rooted out with the bad. All this the Lord spoke to me, and many other things which I cannot make manifest. May His Majesty eternally be blessed, who, without disdaining the insignificance of so incipient and useless a woman, deemed it proper to enlighten and to satisfy my ignorance in so bountiful and merciful a manner. May the blessed spirits and the just of the earth give Him praise and thanksgiving without end. Amen. How the Most High gave a beginning to His works, and created all material things for the use of man, while angels and men were created to be His people under the leadership of the incarnate Word. The cause of all causes is God, who created all things that have being. His powerful arm gave existence to all His wonderful works ad extra, when and how He chose. The beginning and succession of the work of creation is described by Moses in the opening chapter of Genesis. Since the Lord has given me an understanding thereof, I will mention what I think useful for elucidating the mysterious origin of the incarnation of the Word and of our redemption. The words of the first chapter of Genesis are as follows. In the beginning God created heaven and earth, and the earth was void and empty, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved over the waters. And God said, Be light made, and light was made. And God saw the light that it was good, and He divided the light from the darkness. And he called the light day and the darkness night, and there was evening and morning one day, etc. Of the first day, Moses says that in the beginning God created the heaven and earth. Though he himself is immutable in being, the Almighty God, in calling creatures into existence, issued, so to say, forth from his own self, and gave to creatures a being of their own, in order that he might, as it were, rejoice in the works of his own hands, as being the perfect and adequate results of his operations, and before creating intellectual and rational creatures, desiring also the order of executing these works to be most perfect, he created heaven for angels and men, and the earth as a place of pilgrimage for mortals. These places are so adapted to their end and so perfect that, as David says of them, the heavens publish the glory of the Lord, the firmament and the earth announce the glory of the works of his hands. Psalms 18:2. The heavens in their beauty manifest his magnificence and glory, because in them is deposited the predestined reward of the just, and the earthly firmament announced that there would be creatures and men to inhabit the earth, and that men should journey upon it to their Creator. Before he created them, the Most High wished to provide for them and create that which is necessary for the attainment of their end, and for living in the manner ordained for them. Thus all parts of the creation would be completed as it were, to obey and love their Maker and Benefactor, and by his works to learn of his holy name and of his perfections. Romans 1:20. Excuse me. Of the earth Moses says that it was void, which he does not say of the heavens, for God had created the angels in the instant indicated by the word of Moses. God said, "Let there be light," and light was made. He speaks here not only of material light, but also of the intellectual or angelic lights. He does not make express mention of them, but merely includes them in this word. On account of the proclivity of the Hebrews to attribute divinity to new things, even of much greater inferiority than the angels. But the metaphor of light was very appropriate to signify the angelic nature, and mystically the light of their science and grace, with which they were endowed at their creation. God created the earth conjointly with the heavens, in order to call into existence hell in its center. For at the instant of its creation, there were left in the interior of that globe spacious and wide cavities suitable for hell, purgatory, and limbo. And in hell was created at the same time material fire and other requisites, which now serve for the punishment of the damned. The Lord was presently to divide the light from the darkness, and to call the light day and the darkness night. And this did happen, not only in regard to the natural light and day, but in regard to the good and the bad angels. For to the good he gave the eternal light of his vision, and called it day, the eternal day, and to the bad the night of sin, casting them into the eternal darkness of hell. Thus we were to be taught the intimate relation between the merciful liberality of the Creator and Vivifier, and the justice of the most just judge in punishment. The angels were created in the empyrean heavens, and in the state of grace by which they might be first to merit the reward of glory. For although they were in the midst of glory, the divinity itself was not to be made manifest to them face to face and unveiled, until they should have merited such a favor by obeying the divine will. The holy angels, as well as the bad ones, remained only a very short time in the state of probation, for their creation and probation with its result were three distinct instants or moments, separated by short intermissions. In the first instant they were all created and endowed with graces and gifts, coming into existence as most beautiful and perfect creatures. Then followed a short pause, during which the will of the Creator was propounded and intimated, and the law and command was given to acknowledge him as their Maker and Supreme Lord, and to fulfill the end for which they had been created. During this pause, instant or interval, St. Michael and his angels fought that great battle with the dragon and his followers, which is described by the Apostle St. John in the 12th chapter of the Apocalypse. The good angels, persevering in grace, merited eternal happiness, and the disobedient ones, rebelling against God, merited the punishment which they now suffer. Although all this of the second instant could have happened in a very brief time on account of the subtle nature of the angels and the power of God, nevertheless I understood that the kind consideration of the Most High permitted a certain delay. With the imposition of some intervals of time, he proposed to them the good and the bad, truth and falsehood, justice and injustice, divine grace and friendship, as opposed to sin and the enmity of God. They were enabled to see eternal reward and eternal punishment, the perdition of Lucifer and of those that would follow him. His Majesty showed them hell and its pains. They saw it all, for by virtue of their superior and excellent nature they understood the essence of other